All right, good morning. Can you guys hear me through this just fine? What's that? Okay, I'm just making sure everything works. And then I've got the live stream up and running, so. Ashley, you can hear me okay though? Okay, good. All right, for those of you joining us at home, we're going to get started in just a minute here. We got the live stream up and running a couple minutes early to make sure everything's working. Hello. And we're going to get started in just a minute with session 7 of our Worldviews class on Eastern Pantheistic Monism. That's a mouthful, isn't it? All right, so we'll get started in just a second. All right, well, let's see. 9:29, why don't we get started? So this morning we're looking at Eastern Pantheistic Monism, or if you want to put it in simpler terms, Hinduism and Buddhism. So Sire will be quick to point out, which I guess that's my weekly reminder to point out that we are using James Sire's The Universe Next Door. I've got the 5th edition here. I just got the 6th edition in, so if anyone wants to take a deeper look into any of these, a lot of what we're looking at comes directly out of his book, which is to help us understand worldviews and how those help us to understand the world around us, whether it's the view we have of the world or helping us to understand the views of other people so that we can engage with them in deeper conversation. I did send out a link before we started the class a few weeks ago on a PDF copy of the 5th edition of that book, but if anyone is interested in borrowing a physical copy, like I said, I've got 2. So, Eastern Pantheistic Monism. Why don't we start this morning by quoting from the Siddhartha. And all the voices, all the goals, all the yearnings, all the sorrows, all the pleasures, all the good and evil, all of them together was the world. The great song with 1,000 voices consisted of one word, Om, perfection. Forgive me here, we've got a little bit of an issue with our projector. Oh, it's back, good. There, all right, excellent. Now, in Western thought, eventually we reach an impasse. This is from Sire. Naturalism leads to nihilism, and nihilism is hard to transcend on the terms that the Western world, permeated by naturalism, wishes to accept. So to make sense of all that, as we walk through the Western world's progress from a worldview defined with God as creator to one in which God is distant to eventually where God is merely another word for those forces that are at work in our universe, to where the very idea of God is something which must be overcome for humanity to truly be free. When we get to Eastern Pantheistic Monism, the difficulty is we're going to have 2 different ways of thinking. One in the Western world that follows much of the post-Enlightenment thinking, and then you get that in the East, which is going along another path altogether. That Eastern thought, which has been going on for quite some time. So, if we're looking at atheistic existentialism, like we talked about last week, the idea that God does not exist and that our existence is what we make of it, does have some problems. Theism's an option, but for a naturalist it is uninviting. How can one accept the existence of an infinite, personal, transcendent God For over a century, that question has posed a serious barrier. Many people today would rather stick with their naturalism, for it still seems to be a decided improvement on the fabulous religion it rejected. Moreover, modern Christendom, with its hypocritical churches and its lack of compassion, is a poor testimony to the viability of theism. No, it is thought, that way will not do. And so we can look at naturalism where it went wrong, where naturalism then leads to nihilism, that it goes from things only being important as it applies to man not even being able to tell if we exist, that we can confirm any of that rooted in truth, which if everything we think is just the firing of neurons in our brains, if it's just chemicals, then can anything that we think be trusted? Well, you follow that where it needs to go. Existentialism deals with that part way, and now we go all the way. So we can trace the interest in the East to the rejection of middle-class values by the young generation of the 1960s. First, Western technology made possible modern warfare. The Vietnam War is a result of reason, so let us abandon reason. Secondly, Western economics has led to gross inequality and economic oppression of masses of people, so let us reject the presuppositions from which such a system developed. Third, Western religion has seemed largely to support those in control of technology in the economic system, so let us not fall into that trap. It's that rejection of the direction of culture that leads to looking for something else, and at least according to Sire, that happens in the East in the 1960s, where as we retreat from Western thought, we find in the East it's anti-rationalism, it's syncretism, it's quietism, a lack of technology until recently, it's uncomplicated lifestyle, and most significantly, it's exotic and radically different religious framework. So in a search for something that matters, it is a search in a place different than our own to find a way of life and a perspective different than our own. We're going to start again with those 8 basic questions. What is reality? That is, what is the core essential of all that is? What is the world? What does that mean for the world we live in? What is humanity? What happens at death? How can we know anything? Following that, how do we know right and wrong? What is the meaning of history? And last, what does this mean for our lives? So we're going to start in talking about this worldview, in talking about what it is in essence. The difficulty with any of these worldviews, as we've talked about it, is the inability to nail it down completely. Within Christian theism, the ideas of Christianity, we have a wide variety of what people believe is true and what people don't believe is true. Well, within this, we're going to call it basic Eastern Pantheistic Monism, which again is a mouthful. It's distinguished by its monism, the notion that there's only one impersonal element and it constitutes reality. If we go into Hinduism, Hare Krishna does not fit into this worldview, for while it shares many of the characteristics of this worldview, it declares that reality is ultimately personal and thus shares a similarity to theism absent in the Advaita Vedanta. We're going to use some terms that you may not be familiar with, and that's going to be okay. So, we're going to start with some statements that seem kind of cryptic and don't make a lot of sense because we're looking at a perspective that is very different from our own. So if at first you're realizing some of these explanations aren't as clear as I'd like, or some of these ways of understanding reality aren't as clear as I like, we'll try to clear that up as we go. We're also going to need to be aware of the vast differences among religious and cultural elements of Eastern pantheism. So we're going to look and not necessarily analyze their religion, but he does reference Win Cordwan's Neighboring Faiths as a book to look at, and I think I have a copy of that in my office if you're interested. So, either way, we're going to look at a rather basic view of of what we might commonly describe as Hinduism and Buddhism, not so much the history of how they developed, but rather their perspective of the world based on those 8 categories that we've been looking at. So we're going to look at the first part, which deals with questions 1, 2, and 3. What is reality? What does the world look like? And therefore, what does that mean for humanity? And so we're going to start with this, that Atman is Brahman, that is the soul of each and every human being, is the soul of the cosmos. That's going to be a lot to process right away. This is coming from that particular religious worldview. That phrase, Atman is Brahman, is a phrase from the Hindu Upanishads. That is the pantheistic counterpart in contrast to the opening declaration of Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. This is Sire again. Instead of drawing a bold line between God and His creation, however, the Hindu text declares them to be one and the same. Atman, the essence, the soul of any person, is Brahman. The essence, the soul of the whole cosmos. What is a human being? That is, what is at the very core of each of us. Each person is the whole shooting match. Each person is, to put it boldly but accurately in Eastern terms, God. Or rather, nothing is God, everything is matter. So when we say Atman is Brahman, it's that if we want to take this from some of the terms we've been talking about the past few weeks, why is it doing that? Sorry, the projector's giving me trouble here. Come on. Why don't we try this approach? The projector is sometimes the cause. So we're going to turn that off and start it back up. Although people at home are likely not seeing the same issues we are. That's okay. So we're going to talk about that phrase, Atman is Brahman. That would be the subjective aspect of reality is in essence the same as the objective aspects of reality. So if we're talking about core existence within our cosmos, it's that we are simply a part of everything else, that everything is in effect a part of us. Okay, this is still working fine. It's only on the back end, the projector side, that we're running into trouble. So is anyone having difficulty with that phrase? We are going to look at it a little bit more in depth. But the essence is that we are of the same matter that composes the rest of the universe, that we are at our best when we understand our relation to that matter. That's going to come on in just a second. And so as we're looking at what reality is, it's that we really should be striving for our existence in the vast cosmos. So God is all that exists. Nothing exists that is not God. If anything that is not God appears to exist, it is Maya. It is illusion. It does not truly exist. In other words, anything that exists as separate and distinct object, this chair, not this one, this rock, not that tree, me, not you, is an illusion. It is not our separateness that gives us reality, it is our oneness. The fact that we are Brahman and Brahman is one. Yes, Brahman is the one. Ultimate reality is beyond distinction. It just is. In fact, as we see in the discussion of epistemology, we cannot express in language the nature of this oneness. Any questions so far? Well, why don't we continue on, and I think it'll make a little bit more sense as we go on. Here's another cryptic thought, as we're going to see up on the screen in just a moment. We're going to continue with questions 1, 2, and 3. And the statement is that some things are more one than others. So everything is, and everything is one. Oh, hold on a second. What's that? Yeah, that bit on top is because we use our projector as a second screen, and so what we're seeing is the taskbar from the Mac that what should be displaying is the slideshow, and something just went a little bit weird. So, some things are more one than others. That's to say that if everything is the same, or comprised of the same elements, made up of the same things, and our goal in life should be to understand our oneness with creation. Where'd we go here? There it is. Some things are more one than others. If our goal is to become one with creation, which we're going to see more in Buddhism, say Hinduism, some things being more one than others, or that some things are going to be more obviously connected to this. Well, hold on. I should probably wait to get into the deep stuff until I'm with my notes. Eastern thought apparently is like that we end up with cryptic remarks, and we need to wade through those. Some things are more one than others is another way of saying that reality is a hierarchy of appearances. So some things appear to us to be very clear. Some things seem to be more illusory. Matter, pure and simple, is that humanity too is hierarchical. Some people are closer to unity than others. The perfect master, the enlightened one, the guru are the human beings nearest to pure being. They are the nearest to being connected to the cosmos itself. To realize oneness would seem to imply consciousness of the cosmos, but as we shall see, when one is one with the one, consciousness, like techniques of meditation, is just one more thing to be discarded when its usefulness is past. Anyone tracking, or is it getting a little bit convoluted in here? It's all right, we'll keep going. So, Atman is Brahman. Some things are more one than others, and many, if not all roads, lead to the one. That is to say, there is not one distinct path which can lead us to an understanding of our oneness with the cosmos, that what exists in those extraplanetary beings, those planets, those stars, exists in us. Here, getting to oneness with the one is not a matter of finding the one true path. There are many paths from Maya, the illusion, to reality. I may take one, you another, a friend a third, ad infinitum. The goal is not to be with one another on the same path, but to be headed in the right direction on our own path. That is, we must be oriented correctly. Not so much a matter of doctrine, so much as technique. As Sri Ramakrishna said, "Do not argue about doctrines and religions. There is only one. All rivers flow to the ocean. Flow, and let others flow too." So for some people, we need a highly structured, fascinatingly ornate and beautiful circular image to meditate on. Others require endless repetition of prayers or acts of obedience. Almost all of these techniques, however, require quiet and solitude. And so the path toward understanding our existence within everything else is through meditation. Now, years ago, I was in a Buddhist temple, and it was interesting to see people meditating, because the goal of meditation was not to, as we Christians often think, understand ourselves or our relation to God more clearly. For them, it was to understand your relation to the cosmos and, in effect, to lose yourself in it. That's more Buddhism than Hinduism. But the point there is, really, if you can come to a sense of the energy moving around you, of the cosmos moving around you, of your own existence within all that exists, that is going to be the goal. And because it's not terribly specific, that allows room for interpretation. So your understanding of what it means to become more one with the universe may look vastly different than someone else's path to become one. You may have gurus who are spending time in meditation and leading others along that path. You may have some people who meditate in the desert because they find that that solace gives them freedom to meditate. You have others that operate in different ways, and all that, as Sire puts it, is an attempt to connect with this silent consciousness that is all-powerful, all-knowing, the inner ruler, the source of all, the beginning and end of all beings. Now, one aspect of that is chanting the word Om, or a phrase with that word in it. For example, Om Mane Padme Hum. Both the word Om and the phrase are essentially untranslatable because they are intellectually contentless. Some have suggested for Om the following: yes, perfection, ultimate reality, all, the eternal world. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says that Om is the sustainer of life, the beginning and end of all creation. That hum, which is the first silent sound, first silent wave that starts in that silent ocean of unmanifested life. So meaning is not going to be used in this system in the same way that it's used within theism or even naturalism. Yes?
When you mentioned about the different ways that all come to their own conclusion, being one with the cosmos or whatever.
Yep.
Is that same be said for Christianity? When I use that term loosely, Christianity, for instance, as a nation, as a community, as a society, we within the Christian community all have our different ways to getting to the one.
Well, that's a good point, that we would think that within Christianity, and so I'm just saying it out loud here so I can process it, that we each have our own walk with God, and we may take different paths to get to God. Where we would say that differs from this perspective would be specifically Christ saying, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. That we may have our own individual journeys that God leads us on, but without Christ we don't have salvation. I met a man at a train station in India who was on his way to a temple, and he kind of explained as we engaged in conversation that he believed that Christianity, Buddhism was all kind of working the same path. And so where this practically applies is if you've ever heard anyone say, yeah, I believe that all religions are pointing kind of in the same direction. That someone might be a Buddhist, someone might be a Hindu, someone might be a Muslim or a Christian, and it all points people toward the basic good of being kind and loving to one another. That those are some common themes. Yes, it's true that I think religion does often do that in people, but I don't think we would say that we can follow, say, the Hinduistic, the Hindi's the language, Hindu the religion. The Hindu faith, which is where you are giving offerings to what we would describe as graven images, but they're very clear they are not considered idols. Because so if we talk about Hinduism itself, it's that these carved images are embodied by the deities they represent. It's not simply a non-existent thing. So if you go to a Hindu temple, what you'll find is people will leave food in front of these deities. And so that's their belief, is they are contributing something, they're caring for them in that embodied form. Within Buddhism, it would be that we are all to seek enlightenment, and enlightenment is effectively to transcend yourself and become one with the cosmos, effectively ceasing to exist in your form and finding nirvana, that idea that you have transcended the illusion of reality and come into reality itself. See, and the thing is, as Western thinkers, we have this need in us to say, that doesn't make sense, explain it clearly. And the difficulty is because there are a number of different philosophic thinkers, a number of different approaches, perspectives, ways of getting to this point, you can't definitively say that one way is better than another way, that one understanding is better than another understanding, that one explanation is better than another. It's simply that goal to understand how you, made up of the same stuff everything else is made up of, fit into that stuff and effectively are the same as that stuff. Sure, Ward, go ahead.
Do they use that then as a justification for the militancy that they express to individuals outside the way of their thinking?
Now, specifically, are you thinking of any particular persecution?
Yes.
Okay.
Specifically against Christians.
Yeah, specifically against Christians. Now, that is a unique case where more often than not, I would say that is because of cultural differences. Christianity has a way of coming in and messing with cultures. If you want to look at the history of the Western world, Christianity has played an enormous part. And part of the fear is that because it is a Western way of thought, it really goes against the grain in terms of Eastern thought. It is saying there is only one correct way, as opposed to there are any number of correct ways to God. That difference can create a lot of issue to the point where within the past few years there's been a lot of things going on in India as things clash. Part of that is poor representation on Christianity's part, and by that I mean particularly one or two enormous churches from different parts of the world that maybe didn't have all of their doctrine ironed out. And so where some people would describe them as a cult, that creates an odd interaction between these different cultures in Christianity because it may not be a very clear representation of Christianity. Yeah, Ward.
I really appreciate Robbie Zacharias' approach in part because, he was there.
Ravi Zacharias was an inspiration, and if anyone's interested in kind of digging in, he does do quite a bit of interacting with the culture in which he grew up. He's since passed, but if you haven't gotten connected with Right Now Media, we have that as a church. It's free for anyone to use, and the library that they've put together of Ravi's stuff, both just as an apologetic person or an apologetic-minded person and someone who knows that culture, he does a wonderful job. So that's available. If you don't have access to that, let me know. Let's move a little bit further and see if any of this becomes more clear as we go. To realize one's oneness with the cosmos is to pass beyond personality. So what we enter into is the idea or the perspective that well, let's take naturalism to its natural end. If all we are is the untrustworthy existence of things firing in our brains, of a response to stimuli because of things that happened in the past, then we can't even trust our own perspective of reality, let alone our ability to understand or trust our own perspective, which seems maddening. That is the rational approach. I'm not saying this is unrational or irrational, but rather that it's coming at it from a different perspective. In understanding that the world as it exists may exist with or without us. And our existence in it, our personality, our experiences, our temporary life where we come out of matter, and when we die, we re-enter into that same matter. We exist within it, and yet there seems to be an illusion of something personal. The idea of transcendence here is to realize our connection with the cosmos, to pass beyond the illusion of our own personality and enter into the reality that exists within the cosmos. This is what Sire says. Atman is Brahman. Brahman is one and impersonal. Therefore, Atman is impersonal. Note the conclusion again. Human beings in their essence, truest, fullest being, are impersonal. This places this at diametrical odds with theism. In theism, personality is the chief thing about God and the chief thing about people, the identity that we have in being made in God's image. It means that an individual has the complexity at the core of his or her being. Personality demands self-consciousness and self-determinacy, and these involve duality, a thinker and a thing thought. Both God and humanity in theism are complex. In pantheism, the chief thing about God is oneness, a sheer abstract, undifferentiated, non-dual unity. This puts God, or the idea of God, beyond personality, and since Atman is Brahman, human beings are beyond personality too. For any of us to realize our being is for us to abandon our complex personhood and enter the undifferentiated one. This from Mandukya Upanishad quoted above. Atman, it proclaims, has four conditions: waking life, dreaming life, deep sleep, and the awakened life of pure consciousness. And pure consciousness is not actually consciousness, it is pure being, being at one with the cosmos. Which is what brings us to question number 5. And if we remember what those 8 questions are, number 5 is, how can we know anything? And this might be a good question. If what we know, if what we experience is the illusion of personality, the illusion of self-determinacy, if to rise above to an understanding of our simple existence in the cosmos, then how could we know anything? Well, to realize your oneness with the cosmos is to pass beyond knowledge. The principle of non-contradiction does not apply where ultimate reality is concerned. From the statement, Atman is Brahman, it also follows that human beings in their essence are beyond knowledge. Knowledge, like personality, demands duality, a knower and a known. But the one is beyond duality. It is sheer unity. How are we doing out there? Are we doing okay? So the argument here is simple. Reality is one. Language requires duality. Several dualities, in fact. The speaker and the listener, the subject, the predicate. Ergo, language cannot convey the truth about reality. Juan Marsco explains what this means for the doctrine of God. When the sage of the Upanishads is pressed for a definition of God, he remains silent, meaning God is silence. When asked again to express God in words, he says, neti neti, not this, not this. But when pressed for a positive explanation, he utters the sublime words, tat tvam asi, thou art that. It is a sense that to understand reality, we must transcend understanding. To see ourselves in the cosmos, we must move beyond ourselves and become one with the thing we seek to know. Questions 1, 2, 3, and 6 all fall within this statement. To realize one's oneness with the cosmos is to pass beyond good and evil. The cosmos is perfect at every moment. So just like it becomes a question of moving past understanding, moving past personality, you also move past this illusion of right and wrong, this illusion that any of that makes any difference when we exist within the cosmos and the cosmos exists within us. Except this is where we end up in something that we might be a little bit more familiar with. There was a show a number of years ago that wasn't great, but took an interesting take on the idea of karma. And so it was a guy who found some lottery ticket and thought, I didn't deserve this, I need to go and fix a number of things that I did wrong in order to fix his karma that the universe provides depending on what we put out into the universe. You want to put it in a simple phrase, what comes around goes around. I've heard other people describe it that the energy you put out into the universe comes back. So if you put out positivity, the universe responds in positivity, which in my opinion is just a weird view that people have of a God who is not the God of Scripture. Now, as Sire puts it, this is a soft spot in Eastern pantheism because people refuse to deny morality. So whereas within their system it would make sense to be transcending morality, they act as if some actions were right and others wrong. Moreover, the concept of karma is almost universal in Eastern thought. Karma is the notion that one's present fate, one's pleasure or pain, one's being a king or slave or gnat is the result of past action, especially in a former existence. It is then tied to the notion of reincarnation, which follows from the general principle that nothing is real, that is, no soul ever passes out of existence. Or nothing that is real passes out of existence. It may take centuries upon centuries to find its way back to the one, but no soul will ever not be. So where this plays into the idea that the goal is to become one with the cosmos is that because of our seeking that, certain things happen. If you are a person who lives your life cruelly and selfishly, then in your next reincarnation, you might come back worse off. This plays into certain aspects of Buddhism or certain views of Buddhism, in that I was at a temple once where a number of people wore masks. And part of the reason was not because there was smog. It was because of the concept that if every living being is part of the cosmos, then to do anything cruel or outwardly affecting negative would then affect your standing in reincarnation. So it's a dual sense. One is if you step on a bug or inhale a bug, you incur negative karma. The other is that bug may be a reincarnated human being, which puts things in a weird context, that even ants, even other living beings. And so there are, I think it's is it Jainism, a very particular view of Buddhism, which takes a strict stance on the taking of a life. Don't quote me on that. I'm a little bit fuzzy on my schools of Buddhism. Otherwise, this is the difficulty, that you would think we transcend good and evil. Instead, it's that depending on the way we live, depending on our interaction with the universe or the cosmos, you get the Eastern version of you reap what you sow. There is no forgiveness of sins. There is no confession, nothing to do with that. Instead, it is what appears to be a moral universe in a system which does not leave space for a moral universe. Then again, to say it has to make sense in a very particular way doesn't apply to Eastern pantheism. No questions. All right, we'll keep going. Question 4. Death is the end of individual personal existence, but it changes nothing essential in an individual's nature. So where we start to see the work of this transcending personality is, if you, at the end of your death, do not pass out of existence, but rather assume a different form of existence. You move from one aspect of the cosmos to another. You may live as a rich person, and because of your choices in that life, you become a lesser person. There is no corporate responsibility for the needs of an individual because that individual is suffering the fate of the way they lived previously. So if someone is poor, it's because they lived a particular way in their previous life. They may be working up the chain towards transcending their own personality. But as we die, according to this, to Eastern pantheism, we cease to exist in our person. That becomes an illusion, because when we come back as someone else, we're under different circumstances, we develop a different personality, which is where people who are loosely associated with Eastern spirituality may describe soulmates who they might have known in a former life. Despite the fact that if we're being really honest about the way the cosmos works according to at least this perspective of that worldview, it would be that you transcend that was all an illusion, that those things which were unique about you in that lifetime are not real when it comes to the existence of reality. So death signals the individual embodiment of Atman. It signals as well the end of a person, but the soul is indestructible. No human being, in the sense of the individual or person, survives death. The soul survives, but the soul, or Atman, what makes up the universe, is impersonal. When it's reincarnated, it becomes another person. So, in a sense, the soul is immortal, but your personality is not connected to that soul. It's all illusory. We having fun? Let's keep going. Question 7. To realize one's oneness with the One is to pass beyond time. Time is unreal. History is cyclical. Again, if you're like me, that's a doozy. To realize your connectedness with the cosmos is a necessity to pass beyond time, because this perspective of existence is not necessarily in keeping with existence itself. Because we understand things within time, time having no real effect on the cosmos, it being simply an illusion. All history repeats because the cosmos and those lives within it follow a cycle. What is born dies. What dies is reincarnated. And whatever happens either repeats or moves in a cycle where the goal is to escape the cycle of this illusion of existence in order to enter into a simple existence within the cosmos, to escape into not necessarily this external consciousness, rather just pure being. There's quite a bit of reading on that one. I'm not going to probably dig into this too much, but here's one quote. Finally, all the voices, images, and faces intertwine. All the voices, all the goals, all yearnings, all sorrows, all the pleasures, all the good and evil, all of them together was the world. The great song of 1,000 voices consisted of one word, Om, perfection. It's at that point that Siddhartha achieves an inner unity with the One, and serenity of knowledge shines on his face. And so for us, this is a difficult thing to grasp, because it is not a way of thought that we have been raised with. It's not one that the West has embraced. But when it introduces itself into the West, it becomes a muddied thing, and we're going to talk about that more in the coming weeks. Now, like we talked about, this is a very broad look at a worldview which is held by billions of people, from cultures, from different contexts. And the Buddhist difference, I was actually in the place where Buddha was supposed to have reached enlightenment, which is that he transcended himself to realize something about the universe. And there is a difference between Hinduism and Buddhism, in that in Hinduism, you are a soul, and you are reincarnated according to karma. However, in Buddhism, you exist as a not soul. Your goal is to reach enlightenment, i.e., to cease existing. So where there may not be such a focus, essentially Buddha was a Hindu. It's just a particular school of thought which has then taken on forms of its own. So where we would say that being reincarnated according to karma, your life then is whatever you make it, so long as you live in such a way that the universe puts you back in a better position. When I was in India, there were signs in every hotel room about conserving water. The reason being is that you were conserving it for later generations and, practically speaking, yourself. That was one decision which affected the cosmos. And you might come back And because of your treatment of water and what that was doing to others, then, I don't know, live in a desert. Just depends on what the universe does, where it spits you back out in reincarnation. In Buddhism, it's getting out of that cycle of karma, reaching enlightenment and oneness with the universe, effectively ceasing to exist. And so from the outside, Buddhism may seem much like Hinduism. The worldview behind both emphasizes the singularity of primal reality. But here's the difference, as Sire puts it. Hindu monism holds that final reality is the One. The One has, or better, is being itself. It makes no sense to name this thing or to speak of the One like a light bulb shining photons of light farther and farther into the darkness, dispersing its photons more and more from each other. From Brahman, the One, emanates the cosmos. Buddhist monism holds that the final reality is the void. It is nothing that can be named or grasped. To say it is nothing is incorrect, but to say that it is something is equally incorrect. That would degrade its essence by reducing it to a thing among things. The Hindu One is still a thing among things, though it is the chief among things. Sire, making it incredibly clear. In Hinduism, an individual person is a soul and therefore substantial. And their interaction with reality is then an emanation of reality itself. For Buddhism, being a not soul, there is no nameable nature at the core of each person. Rather, you are an aggregate of previous persons. Not the transmigration of the soul so much as the disappearance of a person at death and reconstitution of another person from the 5 aggregates or existence factors: body, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. So, what does all that mean then for the way that we live? Well, depending on your particular path to oneness, your core consistent is by the elimination of desire to achieve salvation. That is, to realize one's union with the One, Hinduism, or the void, pure consciousness. So either to realize your place within the cosmos and to be at peace with that, or to transcend your own being through meditation and the seeking of these external truths which are really already within yourself. The reason this is so appealing to people is that no one can tell you the way to do this right. It's very individualistic, and yet at the same time, it's not individualistic at all. We're all on the same journey to seek meaning. We're all on the same journey to seek oneness, to find purpose. And whether that's to be at one with everything around us, to be connected to the energy of the universe, or if it's to simply cease to exist in finding something greater than ourselves, it hits at that core human need to see what is greater than us. And yet it takes a very simple approach in saying that what is greater than us is either already within us or the removal of us. There's no guilt. There's no need to feel like we are under accomplishing because my path will differ than your path, and yet you are not greater than me for taking a different path. If anyone has anything worthy of saying, it's because they're further along than we are and can guide us on our journey, but in the end, their journey does not need to be descriptive of our own. Sire is going to close us out with just some miscommunication between the East and the West. And he says this, that cyclical history, paths that cross, doctrines that disagree, evil that is good, knowledge that is ignorance, time that is eternal, reality that is unreal, all these are the shifting, paradoxical, even contradictory masks that veil reality. What can Westerners say? If they point to its irrationality, the Easterner rejects reason as a category. If they point to the disappearance of morality, the Easterner scorns the duality that is required for the distinction. If they point to the inconsistency between the Easterner's moral action and amoral theory, the Easterner says, well, consistency is no virtue except by reason, which I have already rejected, and furthermore, I'm not yet perfect. When I am rid of this load of karma, I'll cease acting as if I were moral. In fact, I'll cease acting at all and just meditate. If the Westerner says, but if you don't eat, you'll die, the Easterner responds, so what? Atman is Brahman, Brahman is eternal, a death to be wished. It is, I think, no wonder that Western missionaries have made little headway with committed Hindus and Buddhists. They don't speak the same language, for they hold almost nothing in common. It is painfully difficult to grasp the Eastern worldview even when one has some idea that it demands a mode of thought different from the West. It seems to many who would, like Easterners, to become Christians and thus become theists, that Easterners have an even more difficult time understanding that Christianity is somehow unique, that the space-time resurrection of Jesus the Christ is at the heart of the good news of God. In both cases, it seems to Sire, an understanding that the East and the West operate on two very different sets of assumptions is the place to start. To begin the dialogue, at least one party must know how different their basic assumptions may turn out to be. But for true human communication, both parties must know this before the dialogue proceeds very far. Perhaps the difficulties in Eastern thought that seem so obvious to Westerners will at least begin to be recognized by Easterners. If an Easterner can see that what knowledge, morality, and reality are like as seen from, say, the point of view of Western theism, the attractiveness of the Western way may be obvious. So there's the chief difficulty, that even engaging in that conversation requires language we may not have. So as convoluted and difficult to understand as the Eastern way may be to us, our point of view is going to be strange and convoluted, overly demanding in certain areas to an Easterner. So if you're walking away this morning thinking, I have no idea what we just spent the past 50 minutes talking about, that's all right. Even within the Eastern perspective, when you were to hear some of this, the idea is that you would sit on it, you would meditate on it, and hope that at some point, as you meditate and try to process the mystery of the universe itself, that you come to some grander understanding that is beyond yourself. In Christianity, we have the freedom of saying that myself is broken, and without God's understanding, I don't have any understanding at all. Perhaps in this case, that's especially true. So we're going to close out class this morning with a word of prayer. If you want to think about some of this stuff this week, and if you've got some questions you want to send me, feel free. But I can't guarantee I'm going to have good answers for you. So feel free, think about these things. Next week, we're going to take that a little bit further. Let's see what we have on the schedule for that. It would be, if we go to the next chapter of the book, it would be New Age spirituality, which is if you take some of the precepts of Eastern thought and Eastern religion, intermix that with Western thought, you get a weird mix, and yet it's more popular than you think. So, let's pray and we'll close this morning. God, thank you for today, and thank you for the privilege of engaging with each other in these vastly different perspectives from our own. Help us to remember that there are people even close to our lives who might hold this particular perspective. And if all we ever do is see things from our own eyes, if we only ever walk in our own shoes, then God, our natural inclination is to say, these ideas don't make any sense, and it doesn't make any sense that somebody can hold to this. And yet the reality, Lord, is that there are people who look at us and say the same thing. So God, as your Spirit works in us help us to think through what we believe and why. So when someone asks us why we have the faith we have, we can give an explanation of why that is. But Lord, because we're seeking to understand others, help us to put that into practice, to always think of things from another person's perspective, that we might understand them, that we might love and care for them, and God, if the opportunity presents itself, to share the hope that we have in you. Use us, help us to grow and to think through these things, and Lord, ultimately to bring you all glory. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.